Hi everyone, this is 1 year on. I'm Alison, and following on from episode 19, today's episode is about frustration, and that was something that lasted a long time in my journey. I've mentioned before in the Counselling EAP episode about the grief cycle and how that was something that was in the early days really surprising for me. Until I truly understood the journey that I was on, it was an emotional battle. I was stuck in a body and with a brain that I didn't know anymore. It certainly functioned, but not in the way that was familiar to me. I was a stranger in my own body and mind. That was frustration in itself. I would say I began to see glimmers of myself return in stages and over time. The first glimmer was maybe 6 weeks after the stroke, say maybe the end of April 2024. That was the first glimmer, but it by no means me returning. I was going through the various stages of the grief cycle, and the worst part of it was so painful for me to lose a job I really loved. My employer had to put a new person in that role, which I knew they had to do. But once that person was in it, I knew it would be hard for me to return. I'd been led to believe we would be on a rolling job share once I got back to my hours, with me doing what I could and the other person making up the hours to full-time hours. The client on the floor told me to come back when I was ready. He was happy to have me back, but it was all a mess, and my return there didn't eventuate, which upset me even more. I was so frustrated at how slowly my recovery was going and how slowly the brain recovered. I could see progress, that wasn't the issue. But my progress just wasn't matching my own timeline of wanting to be back to normal, whatever normal was. It was something I didn't and couldn't reconcile with for a long time. I think I finally saw myself at the end of November. And once I was able to be back to work, a reasonable period of time, and my thinking was at a decent level, I felt my brain working again at a reasonable level. The kind of work I do is fast-paced, complex, and you need to have your wits about you. Everyone, and I mean everyone around me, was saying, "Yep, Alison, you're doing really well. You're able to do more than me, as you are now." But I wasn't yet back to the magic baseline, a term I grew to hate. It was the term the cardiologists used to describe where my brain had been in terms of capability just before the stroke, the past me. Alison 1.0. I referred to myself as being Alison 3.0, and Alison 2.0 was the recovering Alison. That made me laugh. I hated the term baseline. It seemed like just such a horrid word to describe my cognitive processes and my spirit. I felt that no one truly understood that I had lost my essence, my spark that made me me. My abilities to do the things that made me special and different to the other 8 billion people on this earth. And so I kept ploughing on, fighting a battle against an invisible enemy. The enemy was me within. The enemy was me, myself, and my brain. What a terrible fight to be having. It wasn't depression, because I wasn't miserable with my life. It was something very specific about my recovery that I was frustrated with. It didn't explode into outbursts of anger, although I did get grumpy with my family from time to time when my words just didn't match up with what I was actually trying to say. I had an extreme lack of patience with myself, and again it was linked back to the slowness, tortoise slow, of my recovery. I felt I was pushing an ever-increasing size boulder up a hill that was getting steeper the further up I was climbing. The boulder kept getting bigger, which meant I had to push harder. Communication was like a battering ram that I had to push. Constructing sentences felt like pushing against resistance. I felt the pushing inside me of almost a rugby player shouldering an opponent in a scrum. That level of pushing, as there was the counter push against me. That was so hard. Sometimes it was worse than others. Sometimes the pressure on the push was easier than others. Even now, I sometimes still get that resistance if I'm particularly tired, if I've overextended myself on that day, and if the conversation is about a particularly emotive subject or something that I'm emotionally invested in. How long this part of the journey will continue, I'm really not sure. It's been my old friend for over a year. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share and subscribe. I will be back next time to talk about my obsessions and how I controlled my world while my memory wasn't particularly good.